Good afternoon. This is Meredith Futhi. I'm the Director of Treasury and Commercial Services here with First Advantage Bank. I really appreciate you all joining us today as we're happy to introduce you to Anna Stott with First Advantage's Payroll Solutions partner, Innova Payroll. Innova is a national payroll and HR solutions company headquartered here in Nashville, Tennessee, offering online payroll for small businesses and a unified human capital management solution for larger companies. Innova creates award-winning solutions for payroll and HR professionals and their employees. Anna's got over 13 years of experience in the payroll and HR industry, and she is the National Core Sales Manager at Innova, where she manages a team of 6 sales consultants in Nashville, Chattanooga, Knoxville, Atlanta, and Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Today, Anna will present 11 costly payroll mistakes and provide you with tips on how to avoid making them in your business. In addition to providing some best practices, this important topic will help you remain compliant with state and federal employment laws. Well, we're going to leave the phones on mute, but please submit any questions that you have throughout the presentation in the chat window, and we will address those in the question and answer session at the end. Again, thank you for attending today, and now I'll turn it over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Meredith. Want to also give a thank you to First Advantage Bank. Thank you for setting this up and also being a valued partner of Innova. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you will find this beneficial. I'll try to make the world of payroll and HR be as exciting as possible. So we are going to get started. On the agenda today, as Meredith said, is our top payroll mistakes, payroll outsourcing myths, how to choose the best payroll service provider, and then we'll answer questions at the end. Payroll mistakes are very costly. I think most business owners don't realize the impact of either not paying people correctly, depositing taxes incorrectly, or just not being aware of all the laws and regulations that are upon us as a small or medium-sized business owner. $6 billion in penalties were assessed in 2017. I can imagine that the numbers in 2018 might be even higher. And it's shocking to know that 33% of all employers have received some type of payroll-related penalty. And most of these penalties have averaged around $845. And that is just if it's based on one penalty. Each company could have multiple. And for a small business, a lot of times, this is not something that's budgeted for. One of the top things we see as a payroll provider is demographic errors, okay? It could be on the amount of unemployment you're paying. It could be employment records, issues with W-2s, and it all starts at onboarding. When you hire your first employee and you're having them fill out a W-4, an I-9, maybe it's direct deposit information or things like that, we always tell people, make sure you inspect what you expect from your employees. Because even the employee themselves may write down things that are incorrect, and what goes into a payroll system or what goes into the state or the IRS for taxes, garbage in, garbage out. So please make sure you're double checking all of your employment records prior to submitting it, either to a payroll provider or for the state or the IRS for your taxes. This is a big one that we hear a lot when we're meeting with business owners. We get the question, am I classifying my workers correctly? Am I paying a 1099 that should be a W-2 and vice versa? And the impact of this for a business and a business owner could be severe. The IRS has put together a plan called the Voluntary Classification Settlement Program that helps businesses who think they may have misclassified their employees. I think a lot of business owners get nervous about raising their hand and saying, hey, I think that I may have had my employees misclassified in the previous year. And this gives you an opportunity to raise your hand and say, hey, I'm trying to do what's right. I'm trying to classify my employees correctly. And you can get a reduced penalty and only pay a percentage of back taxes owed, if any at all. And a lot of questions that we get are, how would I determine, if I'm paying them correctly? The IRS does have a checklist you can go through that helps you assess the situation, but I'm just going to give you a few questions that are typically asked to determine how you're classifying your employees. How often does this employee work for you? Does this person have a set schedule? And do you instruct or supervise this worker? If there are additional workers that need to be hired to perform a job, who's hiring them? Is it you or the worker you have working for you? Who pays the cost of the related work? Who pays for the supplies? How is this worker paid? Are they paid on a set schedule, like weekly, bi-weekly, or semi-monthly? Or are they paid on a project basis? Does the worker make decisions that impact their own profits and losses? Or do they impact yours directly? Did you hire this worker to work indefinitely or for a specific project or time period? Are the worker's activities a core part of your day-to-day business? These are all examples of the checklist on the IRS website that they'll go through to help you determine that. All right, number 3 is processing payroll late or inconsistently. No one wants unhappy employees. Everyone knows if your check date's on a Friday, employees expect to see the money in their bank account on Friday or receive a paper check. And if you process payroll late, a lot of times that doesn't happen. And more than just an unhappy employee, it could end up in some sort of lawsuit because you did not pay your employees within a consistent period of time. The main thing is just setting up a formal process and a timeline. If you have employees that are turning in timesheets and things like that, hold them to that deadline. Because if you're putting information in late, typically you're going to pay late. And what ends to happen is a snowball effect of processing payroll late, which could mean to late tax deposits, depending on how often you're required to deposit your taxes. So I can't stress enough getting a process in place and then sticking to it. Another way is the expense of paper checks versus direct deposit. If you can process payroll in a timely manner and get direct deposit in place, that tends to, proactively keep this from happening on a regular basis. Number 4, failure to record paper checks. A lot of times we see that people are cutting a separate bonus check, or maybe they're doing a payroll advance, or maybe they ran payroll and forgot to pay an employee in the payroll run, so they're having to cut a separate check for them. And you're thinking about it at the time, but then maybe you don't go into your payroll system and actually record that. And then when you do deposit your taxes, they aren't going to be accurate. Your bank accounts typically won't balance because you had money come out that you didn't record anywhere. So make sure if you are doing any sort of manual check, again, whether it be a bonus check, a payroll advance, or just a payment for forgetting to add to payroll, that you do have a process in place where you're going in and adding it into whatever system you're using to keep up with your payroll and your taxes. Number 5, treating payroll as a back burner function. Additional time and money can be spent to correct mistakes that could have been taken care of on the front end. And again, you have unhappy employees if you as a business owner or you as an office administrator are putting payroll as a back burner function and not one of the main things that you're focusing on. We see this happen a lot with a company that is running really lean. If you have a business owner that is wearing multiple hats, typically payroll gets put on the back burner. Get a process in place and stick to it. Most business owners didn't get in business to process payroll, right? They got in business to, run a restaurant or run a law firm, or maybe they opened up their own car repair shop, and doing payroll just happens to be the reason that your employees come, right? They come for a job, they come to get paid. So even though you didn't get in business to process payroll, it is the aftermath of running a business. So make sure you are not treating it as a back burner function. Number 6, time and attendance reporting. I can't stress enough how much having a time and attendance system in place is. It can help you from overpaying or underpaying an employee. And it takes a lot of processes and makes them more efficient. If you do not pay overtime correctly, then that sets you up for all sort of litigation. If you had a labor audit or anything like that. It also scheduling mistakes. You want to make sure that you have the right people in the right place at the right time. And using an automated time and attendance system can make sure that happens. On the other side, something that's not always fun to talk about is what if there was a workers' comp claim, a sexual harassment claim, there was something that was brought to light and you don't have a way to prove that an employee was actually where they said they were. at the time of the incident. It is very important. This comes down to more than just tracking hours. It is a protection of your company. If you're someone that's operating with paper timesheets, it is very easy for those to be manipulated. So having something electronic that puts a time and date stamp and shows an audit trail if there were any changes that were made is super important for protecting your business. It also takes the emotion out of payroll, right? You can say you worked from this hour to this hour, you clocked in here, you clocked out there. It makes it a black and white process. So definitely something that you need to look into if this is something you're handling manually right now. Late or incorrect tax deposits. I can't stress enough how many businesses end up having this as an issue and end up having to have amended returns each quarter. So whether it's a 941 return for the federal taxes or it's a state unemployment return, these are things that end up costing you more money by doing them late or incorrect than maybe if you had an outsourced company that was doing these things on your behalf in only timely manner. And like it says here, penalties range anywhere from 2% to 15%. So making sure that you're doing it in a timely fashion will, at the end of the day, save you time and money. And sometimes these issues take a long time to resolve, and the amount of manpower that maybe someone internally or maybe a CPA is having to spend, and you're having billable hours here, just doing it right on the front end. And again, outsourcing to a company that's going to make sure that's done timely and is taking responsibility for those taxes being deposited and filed on time. Number 8, failure to update SUI rate. This may be one of the most important things because your state unemployment rate is your only controllable tax rate. The IRS gives you your tax rates and there's nothing you can do about it, but with your unemployment, there is. And most of you are probably in the state of Tennessee. And if you are, the new business rate for unemployment is 2.7%. Now that 2.7% can go down and it can go up, and you can control that by doing a few things. One of the things is proper hiring, right? So if you're hiring people right on the front end and finding people that are a best fit for a job, then you're most likely not to turn them over very quickly, right? Obviously things can happen, but if you do end up terminating someone and they file for unemployment and they do receive the unemployment, then that will cause your 2.7% to go up. Now, if you go throughout the year and you haven't had many unemployment claims, then the 2.7% will actually go down. And so it's very important that you're managing your turnover. And on top of that, not getting penalties from the state because you have the wrong unemployment number in whatever payroll system you're using and that you are not depositing the correct amount. This is very important, especially if you are a new business, because you have not paid a lot of money into this unemployment pool. Therefore, if you did have turnover early, a lot of people, hire a lot up front and then maybe weed some people out as time goes. And those people could file unemployment and get it. And sometimes it's warranted and that's okay. But then the state is going to expect you as a business owner to be adding more money to that pool. So what they'll do is raise your rate from 2.7 to say maybe 2.9, 3.1. And then that way, that's how they're making their money up by you adding more to this pool. So it's very important that you manage that correctly. If you receive a notice, it's also very important that if you are outsourcing your payroll, that you send that notice to whoever your company is so they can update it in the payroll system and they're taking that correct deduction. Okay. Number 9, assigning an inexperienced employee to handle payroll. This kind of goes back to one of the earlier slides when payroll tends to be put as a back burner function and the owner is wearing a lot of hats. They may find someone in the organization that says, oh, I've got a little bit of time here, I can handle it. It's really not something they're highly trained on. Payroll can be a very confidential thing. There's also a risk of embezzlement if you have someone that has access to employee and employer bank accounts. So it's very important when you're assigning payroll as a task to someone that you do your research, possibly even a background check before you pass that responsibility over. A couple of other things just outside of confidentiality and embezzlement, it's just proper training, right? If you are assigning it to someone that's not experienced, make sure they're well trained, whether you're using an in-house system or you're outsourcing to a provider such as Inova, who will definitely train you and make sure that whoever's handling that is fully responsible and understands the importance of doing it timely. Because then, like I mentioned earlier, that has trickle-down effects of tax deposits and unhappy employees. Number 10, improper handling of garnishments, levies, or child support. This is also very important. A lot of times businesses don't realize that if you have an employee that does have a garnishment, it is your responsibility as the employer to make sure that that money is sent to whatever agency is asking for it and that it's properly deducted from an employee's account. This all starts with something called new hire reporting. Within the state of Tennessee, you have 20 days to report any new hire to the state of Tennessee, letting them know that based on their social security number, that person now works for you. If that person does have a garnishment, they will then send a document to you as the employer with the number in which to put into the system and the amount that's supposed to come out and where it's supposed to go. You as the employer are responsible for that. Inova will take care of your new hire reporting, as will other payroll companies, but if you are handling payroll yourself and this is not something that you've been doing, please make sure to go back and do that. With payroll and garnishments, there's only a percentage of someone's pay that can be taken out per pay period. So within a payroll system, it will take out a certain percentage and make sure it leaves a certain percentage for the employee. And especially if they have more than one garnishment, you need to make sure there's always one that will take precedence over another, and that needs to be set up correctly as well. Number 11, failure to apply the latest laws and regulations. There's ever-changing laws, whether it comes from the IRS or it comes from the state. And typically, if you're using some sort of in-house payroll system or HR system, those are not going to update on their own. So it's very important that you're keeping up to date with any laws or changes. You're reading different journals, you're signing up for blogs, HR providers, provide a lot of information, and consider outsourcing your payroll to an HR or payroll provider that's going to be updating things on your behalf. Underpaying of state unemployment taxes, over withholding of federal income taxes. When the rates change and your system's not changed, then it's up to you to make sure this is taken care of. So now we're going to get into some payroll outsourcing myths. I know we went through a lot of payroll mistakes and pitfalls that businesses fall into, and a lot of times those can be avoided if you are outsourcing your payroll. I'm going to get into a few myths of reasons why some people choose to do it themselves and try to overcome some of those for you. Myth number 1, I don't have enough employees. A small business is often less equipped to handle these type of tasks. Therefore, a small business is a perfect fit for a payroll company. A lot of people don't realize that whether you have 1 employee, 15 employees, 20 employees, you're still doing the same amount of quarterly tax filings, tax deposits. You're still paying employees, whether it's 1 or 20, and have essentially the same liability. So outsourcing your payroll as a small business tends to be even a better fit sometimes because you don't have the staff in place to handle these type of functions. Myth number 2, it's easier to do payroll in-house. A lot of people don't realize the overall risk you're taking on when you are doing your payroll and how much time you're going to save. Whether it's double checking payroll, looking over timesheets, setting reminders to make sure you're depositing your taxes on time, and you're doing your quarterly annual filings. There's a lot of time that goes into that, and using a third-party provider such as Inova tends to save business owners at least 10 hours per month, if not more, depending on the size and complexity of your payroll. So a lot of people have found it not too difficult to be doing it themselves, but once they've outsourced to a provider, it's amazing how much time they've gotten back in their day. Myth number 3, outsourcing payroll is too expensive. We always understand that this is a valid concern. People have a budget, especially small businesses, to stick through, and they're concerned that whatever a payroll company would charge would be a lot more than what it would be for them doing it themselves. However, I think that you'll find the value in the service and the time spent gives you the money back. On top of that, if you did have any tax deposits that were late or anything that needed to be audited, then that's going to cost you money in amending them or additional fines or fees for the late tax deposits, which end up paying for our service. So I think if you spoke to us or a different provider, you'd find that what we are charging versus the time you're getting back in your day really leads you to believe that actually outsourcing payroll is not too expensive, and it's something you can't do without. Myth number 4, My data won't be secure if I outsource my payroll. And like I said here, this is one of the hardest ones to overcome. But I think that you will find that if you do your research, the majority of companies have firewalls in place. We have backup over backup, tons of redundancy to make sure that your information, which we know is very sensitive, social security numbers, account and routing numbers for your employee's bank and your own personal bank, we're making sure that this stuff is taken care of, and we know it's sensitive information. So do your research when choosing a provider, which I'll get into in a minute, to make sure they do have things in place. Storing things on our server versus storing things in your own server tends to be more secure. Myth number 5, I'll lose all control over my payroll functions. And we always realize for people that have maybe done payroll for 10, 15 years on their own, that handing over that control can be a little nerve-wracking. But I think you'll find that you still have control over your payroll. You just have an expert helping you out, right? Someone that's a trained payroll provider, someone that's trained on HR, and it gives you the peace of mind of knowing that everything that's being handled is handled by someone who's keeping your information secure, who's trained on the process, who can answer questions and hopefully keep you out of trouble. That's our main goal. So, it's one of those things that I think once people start with the process, they start feeling more comfortable and realizing they do have a lot of control just with the backing of a company. Now we're going to get into how to choose your best service provider. Where to begin your search. Typically, business owners or HR professionals that work within a business network with other business owners. So talk to your friends, talk to your family that outsource their payroll and get their input on who they're currently using or maybe who they've used in the past that they either liked or didn't like. It's always a good place to start. Other trusted business partners, right? Ask your bank. Ask your CPA or another business consultant. Who do you recommend? Do you have other clients that have used said payroll provider, and what's their experience been? Company reviews from the Better Business Bureau. That's always a great place to start. You're going to end up with a reputable company. There are many software sites that will do reviews, so see what everyone else is saying. Industry directories, so someone that's involved in the Society of Human Resources and different things like that will give their reviews and give you information on who they recommend depending on what your needs are. And then do your own research. A lot of people end up making their choice before they even talk to someone from a company just based on reviews. How to narrow your search down. There are going to be companies that are going to be a better fit for you than others. So you need to figure out what services do I really need, and then figure out which company offers those services. Make sure the people that you're working with hold the certifications that are needed. Always work with a payroll company that's bonded and insured. There are a lot of people out there that do payroll. That doesn't mean that they necessarily should be. So make sure that you are with a company that's bonded and insured and your information is correct, that they have security measures in place to protect your payroll data. And how often are things audited, right? How often are they looking at what they're doing and making sure that it's the best, most up-to-date way to be doing it? Who is responsible for paying your payroll taxes? There are a lot of companies that will actually process the payroll, do your direct deposit, but at the end of the day, you may still be responsible for depositing those taxes. Another big question to ask is who signs the tax returns? I can speak for Nova that if we're processing your payroll and we're doing your tax returns, whether it be your federal 941s, 940, state unemployment returns, it's our signature on the line. So if anything ever needed to be amended, it would fall back on Nova, not on you as a business owner. Who pays the penalties? Along with that, if there were for any reason a penalty that was assessed, you need to find out, is it the payroll company or you as the business owner that is responsible for that? Always ask about contracts. With Inova, we have no contracts in place and you are billed month to month or payroll by payroll. We want to earn your business every payroll. And so anything that you would sign would just be agreements. A lot of payroll companies have this type of agreement in place. So just always ask, am I locked into it any certain time frame? Is it 2 year, 1 year, or am I paying you per pay period? Read the service agreement carefully. A lot of companies have extra fees that are not provided in the quote. So make sure you're asking a lot of details about the pricing. Is this a per pay period cost? Do I have any additional quarterly or annual costs that aren't listed on here? That's always very important. And of course, I'm going to say choose Inova. I would say one of the big differences in Inova is that we will literally change something for one client. We take client feedback very seriously. And so if we have a client come to us and they have an issue or they have a question, we're always willing to go the extra mile to make sure they're getting what they need. And in choosing partners like First Advantage Bank, we believe that we have the same philosophy on how we treat our clients. And so we hope that obviously we would be your choice. A lot of these things have nothing to do with Inova. They have to do with you as a business owner or you as a person running the business. Outsourcing your payroll to a reputable company is always a good idea. Now we're going to open the lineup for questions. It can be any questions around, outsourcing payroll to what are your requirements for your taxes, things like that. So feel free to ask anything and I will answer those questions to the best of my ability.
Anna, this is Meredith. We've got a few questions that have been entered. One that's come through reads, I've only have 2 employees. Does Inova handle payroll for companies my size? If so, how do you charge?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. We put something in place about a year ago called our Express Payroll Package, and it's geared to companies with 1 to 10 employees. You can be a weekly pay frequency, bi-weekly, semi-monthly, or monthly, and it's still a flat fee that we charge. We realize as a small business owner that you have a budget in place, and so we want it to be where each month your pricing is not going to change, even if you add a couple employees. So putting something in place like our Express package has really, upped the amount of clients that we have that have 1, 2, 3 employees, and that is a perfect fit for us.
Okay, we've got another one. I've always handled payroll myself. If I decided to outsource, what does that setup process look like?
Yes. So we have a lot of companies that come to us that have never outsourced their payroll before. And so we know that that process can be daunting and a little nerve-wracking. Years ago, switching payroll companies from one provider to another or going from an in-house payroll system to an outsourced provider looked a little bit different. Now, whether you're switching in the middle of a payroll period, you're switching mid-month, mid-quarter, mid-year, it doesn't really matter to us. We're going to work closely with you. Anything that's been paid so far to your employees, let's just say in 2019, we're going to take that data from whatever system you've been using it, enter it into our system, audit it, make sure that everything's been done correctly, your taxes have been deposited correctly, and then start fresh. So it would look as if we'd processed your payroll from day 1 of 2019. Your employees would still receive 1 W-2. They wouldn't be receiving 1 from your prior system and 1 from us. We make it a really seamless process. We have a dedicated implementation team that works directly with you to make sure they're answering all your questions, they're training you properly, and we really will be as involved or uninvolved as you would like during the setup process.
Okay, great. I've got another one that reads, I've only had 1099s until now, but believe I need to transition them to W-2 employees. What's the best way to go about that?
Okay, absolutely. So I've mentioned earlier about the incorrect classification and some of the questions that you can go through to determine that. And if you go through that process and you do determine that the people that you are paying should actually be W-2 employees instead of 1099, there's a form called the 8952. And you can go on the IRS website and find this. And that is a form that you will fill out to start the process of reclassifying your employees. And by doing that, that's when the IRS will take a look and hopefully say, look, I see this company is trying to do the right thing. They've gone about this. They've gone through the checklist. They filled out the form. And then they'll put you through the process of transitioning them and hopefully not having to pay the back taxes or any penalties because you raised your hand and said, I'm trying to do this correctly. So again, that form is the 8952 and can be found on irs.gov.
Okay, great. Do we have any other more questions from the attendees? Okay. Thank you, Anna. Go ahead.
You're so welcome. I'll say my information's here. So feel free to take down an email address or phone number. If you have any follow-up questions, I'm happy to answer them. And thank you, Meredith. I'll give it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Anna. This has been really helpful. And I appreciate everybody's questions this afternoon. We're going to be sending the presentation deck and the link to this recorded webinar so that if you need to share it with anybody or go back and reference any of the myths or any of the costly payment mistakes, you're going to be able to do that. And if you'd like to speak with someone at Inova, you're happy to reach out to us and we can put you in touch with them. And we appreciate you being here today, and I hope everybody has a great afternoon. Thank you.